Imagine passing away and your family walking up, and what would they said about you? Because I am a brilliant visionary, and yet I wasn't brilliant at being present.
What advice do you have to be able to create that type of conversation about the other 90% of the people still have some type of trauma?
Realizing what matters most, but not just realizing what matters most for me, it's realizing what matters most for those who matter most.
Very joyful, very loving. Nobody ever called me peaceful, ever.
Well, any anger, fear, or frustration is a learning opportunity. And if I avoid it, it's going to come back bigger.
What people are going to crave, what entrepreneurs especially are going to crave, is community and connection.
To learn how to create spiritual conversations and not be afraid of it.
But when you think about your legacy, what do you hope to leave behind? Do you ever feel like your brain's scattered all the time and that you have this chatter in between your ears, right? The head tracks? Well, listen to this podcast because Coach Bob is here, the founder of I Matter and the author of the book, Unscattering the Chatter. We're going to dive deep into how you can have personal freedom and maybe start a spiritual practice on top of being an amazing entrepreneur and visionary. I'm sitting with Coach Bob, a visionary's visionary, and we're at the fabulous Gun Lake in Michigan, and we just got done with a visionary summit. It's a very transformational workshop, retreat, spiritual and business kind of mixed together. It's hard to really explain. We'll get into that at the end of the podcast. But Coach Bob, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You've achieved a lot in the business world. I know that because I know your story. But what do you think was the moment that made you realize there was something deeper and that was missing in your life?
It was about 25 years ago, and I had a vision I hadn't really thought deeply on, but kind of what success looked like. And I remember it was a Tuesday spring morning, walking into the house of my dreams, opening the door, walking in the middle of the day, and looking at the last piece of artwork on the great broom wall and really expensive couch I wasn't allowed to sit on because I might spill. And I had everything that I thought would make me feel successful. And I never felt emptier. And that's when my journey began. And I realized there's something more. I didn't know what that was. But it was a burning desire that lit to say it's time to figure it out.
How old were you?
So I would have been 35.
Okay. Wow. 35 years old, you had like the epiphany.
Yes.
What, did you ever have moments like before that where you realized like your external success and the money and the things weren't actually making you happy, and they were kind of keeping you from having peace?
I really hadn't thought of it. I mean, literally, as a kid, it was kind of everything's happy and magical, and then I felt let down by many things. And again, I didn't really think about it, but that is there something greater? And maybe I'm not meant to do something amazing to be remembered by. So I kind of literally gave up on that magic and that dream and just went along with the flow and did what pretty much everyone else was doing, and go to college, get drunk, get a job, start a business. That was very cool. Also in my business, when we were really struggling and I was going to sell the company and we decided not to, and my team cheered, that's when I became a leader. That's when I realized, okay, there's something else here. So that was a huge epiphany that maybe I am destined for something, even if it was just to lead this group of people. And then that became successful. And then I thought that would make me happy. And then that's when I realized when I was 35, it's like deep down, I wasn't happy. My family, we were the happy family. And we laughed and we played sports, and it was a lot of fun, but we did not talk deep.
Why do you think that was?
My parents grew up in the Depression and the scarcity mentality. I don't know if they had it as much as the world had it, and very conservative on spending. We took a lot of trips, but it was literally we'd camp and stay at the cheaper hotels and do this. And I didn't care. It was all wonderful. We were big about being in nature and watching the sunrises and sunsets and being on a lake and playing tennis outside. But we didn't really talk deep. So it was more laughing and fun, but we would just shove emotions down. Not on purpose necessarily, but it became a habit. And so if it was, I feel uncomfortable, well, why you shouldn't feel uncomfortable? You have everything you need. And so, yeah, you're right. So it's a great defense mechanism. And yet I know I shoved a lot down, not only the negative emotions of the lower vibrations, but I think it also shut down, how do you think? It shut down some of the higher vibrations of real love and peace and joy.
Don't get too high, don't get too low.
Right? Yeah, ride the wave. And
yeah, I feel like the older generation, and when I say that, I'm talking even older than you, right? Like I know
like my parents.
Yeah, like
right.
I think the people that are probably 80, right? We're not allowed to talk about money. We're not allowed to talk about stuff, right? So like
sex.
Yeah, like if you're hurt, get up and brush it off and get back in there, and
always don't cry.
Yeah, and if you win, act like you've won before,
right?
Type of like just it's very interesting. What were some of those emotions as a kid that you remember, maybe that you wanted to share, or like that you just didn't? I know you've done a lot of healing work now, so maybe you could look back into your childhood and say like, man, I wish I could have just told my mom or dad that, or I wish I could have told somebody that, but like I was really struggling with this.
My sister's 8 years older, brother's 5 years older. My sister and I were both outgoing. My brother wasn't. My brother is amazingly smart and a shy redhead kid. And so he had some angst toward both my sister and I. And so he would play pranks on especially me. And I just wanted to love him and play with him. And I'm like, why wouldn't we? This is my brother. And so that was a big thing where he would literally make fun of me or pull a prank just to kind of knock me down a notch or two. Mm-hmm. And I still remember that. And I mean, it's nothing horrible, but it still reminds me that how could my brother do this? And my mom going, well, that's how he is. I'm like, I'm still hurting. And I didn't even know what that meant. So it's like, okay, well, I guess it's just how it is.
Yeah. Have you ever talked to your brother about that?
Not real deep.
Yeah.
It's interesting because with the work that we've created at I Matter and the work I'm doing with all these other people, I'm starting to do it with my family a little bit. And it's so uncomfortable for my brother and sister. We literally sit in my space where I do sessions with my brother and sister. A year ago, we did it. And then my brother's like, well, I'm going to bring mom. I'm like, no, I want to really talk. And he was like, no, I think it'd be good for her to kind of hear it. And it was so cool because the way we do it, we ask questions, we write it down, and then we share. It's easier, I think, for people to share emotions when they're reading it, even though it could be their emotions, but to put someone on the spot often is hard. And so we'd ask questions, write down, and then we'd share it, and we got deep. And my mom would chime in once in a while. And she already knew what was going on. We've been protecting my mom from, your grandchild's unhappy, or I might have a money issue, and we never tell mom about anything that's bad. She already knows. I mean, that she just wants us to be happy. We just never really talked about it. So to do a healing session with my brother, not necessarily.
So there's probably a lot of families. I mean, I would say 99.99999% of America grew up just like that.
Yeah, right.
I mean, so it's not very uncommon, but now people that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s are starting to like think differently, right? And there's more of like a conscious awareness, right? Whether people know that word conscious or not.
Right.
I feel like that's a big word for some, but you mentioned when you went into the house, and I can picture you, like you got your dream house, everything was just finally perfectly done. You were walking in, it's like I could feel that emotion, and it's like, is this all there is?
It was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, and the payments.
I worked my ass off. Right.
Yeah, it's like, this is it.
Right.
Like, yeah, that you thought like it was going to be like, like a big party for like the rest of your life.
Right.
Yeah, I had that feeling once. So what'd you do about it? Like what's the process to go from what we can imagine as old school Bob just walking around, just being like that college kid, doing the business. We all have those friends. Like some of us are thinking about it right now. They're like, hey, that's me. I'm still actually living that life.
Right.
Maybe they haven't had their aha moment of like, oh, is there more to life? What was your process to like go from that Bob to the new Bob?
I don't recommend this for everyone, but I was married and I didn't know who I was and didn't show up. And my ex-wife, I don't know if she knew who she was. And we just had fun. We were that couple. We just had fun. we'd have drinks, we'd go to a great sporting event, we'd make fun of people, we'd laugh. And it was when I started to question it is when Cheryl came into my life. And so our process was I felt something I'd never felt before. And that was this deep connection and love. And so whether she brought that out of me or I was ready for it or whatever it might be. And so it was really together that I left to go do some work and then left my marriage. And then Cheryl and I started to come together, and our passion and hobby and almost obsession was personal growth, spiritual growth, and relationship growth. And so doing couples weekends and spiritual retreats out to Colorado, and there were several books, Conversations with God, Neil Walsh, Celestian Prophecy. And so Cheryl and I started to talk a different language. And she was the one who, when we first met, she's like, you're rushing and you're running, which now we call driven, and you're just doing. I'm like, yeah, that's why I have everything I have. And she's like, yeah, but it's about being. And she was just so peaceful and centered. And that was when I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't even, it was like a foreign thing. So but then we started to go through it together and totally fell in love with each other and with life and with love, and starting to tap into the infinite intelligence and God and nature and spirit. So we literally moved to Colorado and dove into a lot of healers and nature. And so it was a deep dive, and just literally sitting on the top of the Flatirons of Boulder and looking down and saying, I figured it out. And I got this voice that, oh, you think so? I'm just kind of tap, tap, tap. So then throw in some money issues and health issues and relationship issues, kids. And so we went from this state of being to then back to the doing for many years, and just being in more survival mode with our kids and whatnot. But so it was a couple of years of intense spiritual work together and separate that woke me up in a lot of ways. Then kind of left it a little bit for the kids, but then we kind of went back to the old way. I'm like, I'm doing the same old shit I was doing before, and I'm worried and nervous and not enjoying. And that's when Cheryl sent me away on a retreat after Nicholas was born, Nick, who's now 18. So 18 years ago, she said, yeah, and I think 2 weeks after he was born, she said, you need to go away for a while. And I'm like,
were you driving her nuts?
Yes. And I said, but do you want me to come back? And she said, yes, but as you're better than this. Because I was angry, I was nervous, I was scared. Because I'm like, I had it all. And then had these depths, and then we regrouped, and that's when literally out in the mountains of Colorado, and that's when Go to the Mountain was created, that I got a download so clear. As a fellow visionary, I think you'd appreciate it. I had lots of visions of how I can solve your problem or a new business or a new service, but all of a sudden I had a vision for life and for my life. And it was so clear. And it was to help people to know and act like they matter and avoid the pain, is what I thought. And as I was working with my healers and my mentors, and they were like, that is amazing, but there's one change. You're here to help people to know and act like they matter, and to use the pain, and to flip the pain. I'm like, damn it, I'm really good at avoiding it.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge thing. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go there. And that's when it was clear. And so that is still the same vision. And so in the last 4 or 5 years, and there's other things that came up that helped me to kind of nudge me to say it's time, and to write the book Unscatter the Chatter and finalize the process that really we wrote for me. I was scattered and all over the place. And so Cheryl and I created a structure of things that I like to do, and helped me to tap into my brain, which I love to do. And it almost occupied my brain to allow me to get to my heart.
What were some of the, you mentioned Unscatter, and I love that term because I feel like a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, drivens, people with ADHD, right? That's the label.
Right.
It's the one I got diagnosed with when I was, probably 8 or 9 years old back in the late 80s. I didn't have ADHD when you were a kid.
No,
right?
I would have for sure. I would have been probably put on drugs, and I'm so glad I wasn't.
Yeah. What were some of the negative effects of your scattered brain on your wife, maybe your previous wife, maybe, you know, the early days of being a dad and a business owner? What were some of the moments that you remember, like, oh crap, like, why do I keep doing this type of stuff?
I can be intensely present for very short spurts of time, but then to not be focused on our attention here. And I was very driven to get to the next level. So if there's someone behind you that I thought I could get something out of, and you and I were talking, I'd be kind of like, okay, cool, but I'm moving on over here. And so I wasn't present a lot if I didn't think I could get something out of it. And so I'm sure that affected my relationships, my customers, my employees, because I am a brilliant visionary, and yet I wasn't brilliant at being present and being with people and meeting them at their level. And I couldn't even understand if someone was depressed or had shame or fear or anger, because I'm like, get the fuck over it. Yeah, you know, you're alive.
That's what your mom and dad would say.
Right. And so when I would sit with someone with depression, I'm like, but you have a great life. And they're like, you don't understand what this is. This isn't a choice. This is how I feel. And I couldn't even comprehend that. So as I've gone through struggles and adversities and lower vibrations and literally saying, why am I going through this? I had this great life, to I now have more compassion to meet people where they're at. So when I hear your story, I don't know exactly what it was, and it may not be the exact same thing, but it's a similar emotion. And so even whether it's shame, anger, fear, depression, and it may not have been for my life, but that's how I felt. And I literally have felt guilty of sharing some of my emotions, because if I hear yours and it's like, you went through what? And mine was because my brother made fun of me one day. I'm like, mine's nothing. And yet it still affected me. It was part of the narrative in my brain, part of the chatter. And so then making decisions out of either fear or avoidance of ever being hurt again, or alone again, even though I was actually very alone a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know that, you know, everybody wants to compare, you know, oh, it wasn't that bad. I can say the same thing about me. Yeah, it sounds like maybe some worse things happened to me objectively, like if we were going to judge a crime or judge
you win.
Yeah, sure. And then I know people that got way worse than me, right? Like, you know, and so there's people out there listening. I know they're listening because they're laughing. They're like, oh, I know people like Bob, like the old Bob. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I know people that are like, I'm talking to them 1 minute, and the next minute they are looking over my shoulder and they're like, hey, how are you doing?
Right. There's something more important than me.
Yeah. And so, by the way, if you know that person, tag them below in the comments and say, hey, please be nicer to me. But what piece of advice, if you're coaching them, a person that feels like they're getting treated by an old Bob, we'll call him, you know, just a driven person that's just mowing people over.
Right.
They're hurting because they just want their attention. They just want to be friends with them. They just want to be friends with them.
Yep.
What would you say to that person? How could they go about maybe trying to make that person aware? Or do you believe that there is no making that person aware until that person's ready to be aware?
I think it's a combination of both. If it's someone that you have a deep relationship with, it's worth going into it. If it's just a friend from high school, it may or may not be. But what my wife did probably 10, 12 years ago, and our kids were younger, and I was distracted. We were going through the recession, and a couple of my businesses were struggling, and I was working more and more. And she said, what I heard her say was, you're never home, which I was home some of the time. And I said, yeah, but I just got to get this done, you know. And as soon as, and she said a great line, and I said, well, I love you. And she said, I know you. I totally know you love me, but you vote with your feet, and you're not here enough. So why not hang out with me, and if not even me, with the kids? And that really hit me. And it's like, they do matter most. So it's not, I matter is a lot about realizing what matters most, but not just realizing what matters most for me. It's realizing what matters most for those who matter most. So my wife wanted certain things, and I would like, but that's not that big of a deal. That's not what I want. Well, that's selfish. So if it's a marriage or a deep friend or a business partner, to say, you know, do you want to be with me? And if so, act like it. And if it's a casual friend and they're ignoring me, I just choose not to be with them. And so again, I used to think I have 500 friends. And as I did a lot of deep reflection, I realized I had like 4. And I was sad, but that's when I realized, okay, I want 10 or 15 or whatever it might be, but really deep, real conversations. I used to be brilliant at small talk. At the mixer, the networker, I was great. I was usually had a couple cocktails too. And I can't even do that anymore. I mean, if we can't talk about, what's the meaning of life? What struggle are you having, or what dream do you have? I love that. That is one of the most spiritual things to me, is a deep, rich, real conversation in wonder without judgment.
How often do you find yourself being able to have those conversations?
Now, more and more. Well, now more and more because I created a community with people that are open to that.
Sure, but like if you would just go, I know your son's in baseball. He's playing baseball at Princeton.
Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Your daughter just got married.
Yeah.
I think about, the local sports team, the high school sports team, hanging out with the parents and things like that. And I doubt they listen because they're out at the bars and doing their thing, and they're in the rat race.
Right.
What's it like, and how do you mingle? How do you get into that world once you don't have anything in common to talk about anymore, but you still know you need to do it? Like, I think there's a lot of people that are on that. There's the people that are listening that aren't even aware that they're like that.
Right.
Right there. Like, oh, that's not me. Describe that person, the average family in America right now that has kids in high school that are working 9-to-5 jobs. Both mom and dad probably both work. It's hustle and bustle. It's like, oh, can't wait for the weekend. Can't wait to drink. Can't wait to party. Can't wait to just run around, right? Like, just be human doings, right? They don't even know that they're human doings right now.
Right.
Maybe we just made them aware a little bit. But how do you interact with those people once you become a human being? Like, I find that's really hard.
Right.
So.
If I don't have anything in common with them, it's hard. But what we did have in common with the baseball community is our kids, we went to the same school, same age, played on the same team in a sport. So we actually had a lot in common for what mattered most for 10, 12 years. And I loved being with those people and learning and growing. And 95% of our talk was around our kids and the game. And so that was fun. But if we don't have that, then there's not a lot there. And so I don't usually just dive right in if I don't know someone and say, what's the meaning of life? And yet, as we would talk and have more time, I started to drip, so what's your book about? And I would, all right, here we go. And I would say it, and it would be just like, so how about the game yesterday? And that's even how my dad was. We was mainly around sports. And so,
has your dad ever read the book?
No, my dad passed away 11 years ago.
Oh.
And but I do have a page honoring him of the top 10 lessons that I learned from him.
That's right, because you gave the eulogy, and that was in there. That's right.
And I realized the opening line of my book is, my dad passed away, and I was really mad at him.
Yep, that's right. Yep,
because he was small talk, and our family was kind of small talk. And again, it was interesting because it was about us or the baseball game, or we would play tennis together, and so it was fun. But we've never really talked deep. And so one last thing on that is, if someone wasn't ready to go deep, I wouldn't go deep. And one of the things that my daughter is teaching me now is to learn how to create spiritual conversations and not be afraid of it. So I for the last 15 years, I'm like, oh, let's talk. Oh, and then there's a little hint that it's like, okay, now let's talk about real shit. And so my daughter Grace has taught me to just be who I am, not share opinions, but ask great questions. And then if someone's ready to go there, great. If not, that's okay too.
So that's I was just going to ask you. So that's the formula. Because if there's someone out there listening that has some questions for their parents, they want to go a little bit deeper, but they're kind of afraid, right? Because they're kind of like, maybe mom and dad are a little bit more shut down. They're a little bit more reserved, right? Maybe they've never done that. And it's like, there's such a gap now, it feels like. Right. It's a little bit more disconnected. What advice do you have to be able to create that type of conversation about, asking your parents, maybe questions that are a little uncomfortable?
Well, in I Matter and Unscatter the Chatter, we have 9 different tools, and it's basically, I ask myself a question, write it down, and share it. And so one of ours is the connection game. And it's literally, what are your favorite movies, why, and next steps? So it's, I love Family Man with Nicolas Cage. Okay, well, why? I don't know, it's funny. No, well, why? It's like, wow, because he thought he had it all, and he had money and power and could hang with all these beautiful girls. And then he had a glimpse of being married to his high school or college sweetheart and a glimpse of them having kids together. And it was just, it was hard, and yet it was emotionally connecting and deep. So why is it resonates with me, because I kind of had this life where Cheryl and I, we traveled the world and we had a ball and we partied a lot and whatnot. And yeah, it's like, wow, we kind of gave that up to have kids. And it's like, I would never change that, even though part of me is like, oh, that was kind of cool. So to ask ourselves questions, and then it's the why, and then the next step. It's sometimes tough to have a next step for a favorite song, but why does that song mean a lot? It's because it reminded me that one time that we hugged and cried as a baseball team, and that we really felt close. And so the next step is to reach out to those people and say, I miss you. So that connection game is, and again, there's a lot of things. So it's kind of communication starters and finding a common ground, and not trying to prove something. So to go in with wonder. And even when I started my journey and I started to share things about myself with my family, here's why I'm on this planet. What do you think, Mom and Dad? And here's what I do, and here's what I'm great at. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. And I'm like, really? And yet then we started more conversations.
More though, right?
Yeah.
Like you wanted them to just open up like the floodgates. Like they were holding back the whole time, and they were just waiting for you to ask. And
all right. Oh, yeah. No. And so literally, I'm like, and even going through like Landmark Forum years ago, that was another journey that Cheryl and I went through, and a couple of my friends. It's the old Est from the 60s or 70s. So basically,
my listeners probably are going to have no idea. So that's why I've asked for a little context.
It's I don't know if they call it a spiritual class, but it's like a 4-day retreat, and you go, and there's like 30 people, and they kind of break you down and then tap in and kind of figure out what are the conversations going on. That was actually a big part of my life, and my wife and I went through it. And one of the exercises they had us go through was to go to people who in our past and thank them to say, everything good in my life, a lot of that is because of you. And any struggle that I've had or you see that I have, I own, and it's not your responsibility. And that was very powerful. And so what I did with my parents, they were like, yeah, we know. And it's because we were in a good neighborhood. I'm like, who chose the neighborhood? You did. Oh, well, we were just lucky. I'm like, own it. And they would not take that gratitude. It's interesting. So that was an interesting phenomenon to go through. And then also during Landmark Forum, and it's interesting because I haven't thought of this in a while, they had us, interesting. And we just did the eulogy exercise here at the forum, and this must be even where it first started coming from. I had a vision. They said something about imagine passing away and like your family walking up, and what would they said about you? Oh, and Cheryl was 7 months pregnant with our first. We didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. And wow, I haven't thought about this in a while. This is fun. And I imagined my 5-year-old daughter, and I didn't know it was a girl, coming up and looking at the casket or whatever and turning to Cheryl and saying, what was Daddy really like? And I was like, my daughter didn't know who I was. So that was a huge spark to say, I don't know if I really knew who my parents were, their history and the struggles that they went through. My dad was in the Army. I've never heard one story about it. And I'm sure there's some real stories there. Yeah. So my kids know who we are. And they're now 24 and 18. And they know who they are.
Well, a lot of that has to do, I think, it sounds like to me, like the work that you've been doing on I Matter, for the last 20 years. And, let's talk about that a little bit. In your book, Unscatter the Chatter, there's a full list of stories and tools in that book. And we don't have time to cover them all. No. But what are some of your favorites? Give me like 3 of the greatest hits.
Right.
And I Matter. So for anyone listening, they can go buy the book on Amazon or wherever they can buy the book at. But give me the 3 greatest hits for someone listening. That's most of my listeners are probably at that stage where they probably are starting to think that there's more to life, and they're trying to figure that out. That's why they listen to this show, to hear other people's stories, to see like which one they want to adopt the most, and maybe we'll just kind of copy that one for a little while, or try some different things that different guests are going through, and maybe different modalities. What would you recommend? Some of your favorites?
The 2 tools that, if you buy the book, you get access to the tools for free. It's the Take 5 check-in and the 331. The Take 5 check-in is 8 questions, and I do it once or twice a week on my own. And so that's really a form of meditation for me. to fanatically schedule time for myself. I love being by myself. I mean, because it's now that I'm having a conversation in my head and with God and just slowing down to commit to time, because when I slow down, the answers are here. And so the Take 5 check-in is a chance for me to, I'm going to sneeze here. Excuse me. The Take 5 check-in is a chance for me so I make time to hear, in a safe space, to hear myself think and feel myself feel. And so I ask these 8 questions, and then it's the why and the next step. And then I actually record it and send it to important people in my life. Not that they have to hear it, but it's a safe space for me to hear myself think. So it's things that I'm frustrated about, dreads, what's the conversation going in my head? So to tap into that. And so basically it's a way to see what's going on in my head and my heart. And then I download and say, okay, out of that, what are things that I can shift the conversation in my head? So am I rich? Am I a good father? To the last question is, I am. So it's shifting conversation. I can't just in my head say, I am a billionaire. I'm not. But I can shift to say, why do I want $1 billion? It's because then I can help more people. I can have more adventure and travel and more freedom. And I actually have those things. But in my head, I'm not rich. So I've shifted that to say, I am successful. I am wealthy, because I now shifted how I deem success and whatnot. So there's some cool tools around that. I use that about once a month with my wife. And so it's not just, these often in the past, if you said something and then I ask questions or I take it personally or I judge, we write down these questions. I get to share mine for 5 minutes. You get to share yours. And then we do clarifying questions and then list out topics we want to talk about. So it's a non-threatening way for me to tap into what's going on in your head and your heart. And then the other one is the 331. That's a daily tool that I do. It takes about 5 minutes each morning. And I am a fast thinker trying to figure a lot of stuff out, a lot of chatter. And so I wake up, I'm like, I have so much to do. And a lot of it's good. And yet when I just breathe, and usually in my jacuzzi, I just say, okay, what matters most to me today? What are my top 3 impactful action items to be these things would be make it a great day? And then my one, if it were up to me, and that's an I am statement. So if it were up to me today is I'm present with Benny on the lake. It's like, nothing else matters. This is amazing. And yet when I woke up, it was like, I've got to call these people back. And is Cheryl okay at home? And what's going on? And it's like, slow down. Everything's okay. So the Take 5 is more of a weekly tool. And then the 331 is a great tool for me. And then also I share my 331s with other people and vice versa. So it's a sense of accountability. And then I know what's going on in your head and your heart. And then the last one, which is also complementary with the book, it's the rules of engagement of creating a great relationship. And it's shifting the conversation in my head, because as I practice with you on how to have a great relationship, I love you. I don't have a ton of fire. I'm not worried too much about what you think of me. And we don't have a fiery, as like we might have with our spouse or our kids or our business partners. But as you and I practice on how to have a safe space and to respect you and to listen, then when I'm with my wife or my kids, I'm more like that. And then who's the most important human relationship of all? Who's that with?
So,
right. So the chatter in my head, I was not nice to myself. How come you didn't do this? Why didn't you do that? You better do that. You should do this. So that's the chatter. So when I'm doing a Take 5 or a 331 with you and using the rules of engagement, which is to listen, to understand, and not respond, to eliminate the words, or at least be aware of the words better and should and exaggerations, to speak from the I and experience is, I'm not judging you. I'm just sharing my experience and asking questions, as opposed to, if you say, hey, I'm going to do that. Well, you should do it this way. Well, fuck off. I mean, it's like, even though you might have the right intention, it's learning how to shift the conversations in our head and to have a great relationship with someone. So it's the Take 5, the 331, and the rules of engagement of creating a great relationship. Because at the end of the day, I haven't had a lot of great relationships. They've been very surface. And guess what? I didn't have a great relationship with myself. It was very surface.
And you created that, though.
Correct.
Because you were the guy at the party that was just big.
Absolutely. And I was great at it.
Hey, Jay.
Oh, and I was funny, and I boom.
Oh, everybody loves me.
Oh, and I looked good, or at least I thought I did. We do hide in plain sight, so I'm sure a deep soul could look and go, I bet you he's hiding some pain. And it's not about just finding the pain or being the victim, but it's human condition is to work through that pain.
I want to shift gears a little bit, and first I want to make a point about that. So that book you wrote for yourself because you needed a playbook for your life. It sounded like.
Correct.
And then you just happened to share it with the rest of the world.
And Cheryl and I wrote it because she's really the architect behind it. She's brilliant.
Sit still long enough to write it.
Exactly. But it was stuff we were working on together, and then she would be like, oh, but here's what we did. And so, we wrote the book for me.
Yeah.
And because what's the number one most often used word about visionaries? What would you say it is?
Yeah, we're all over the place.
Scattered.
Yeah, scattered.
Yeah. So literally, right.
Yeah.
And literally at this summit, I threw that shit in the fire, which was in my head that I'm scattered. Because that's how I was labeling myself. Well, that's me. I'm scattered. To say, no, I'm an amazing human being. I am present. I am Bob. I'm a father. I'm a great husband. And I'm brilliant because I am looking at all these different possibilities.
Well, maybe you need to come out with a revision of the book and cross out the scattered part.
All right.
Say I don't want to identify as scattered.
Right. No, and that's the next book. Right.
But if you do identify with scattered, you should probably read this book now.
It literally is true because it has changed because now I'm working on other stuff because I have built a great relationship with myself. I am very successful. I humbly say that I've got a marriage that, believe me, we struggle, we have fights, we get frustrated with each other, but at the end of the day, we trust each other. We love each other. We're open and honest with each other. And a lot of it's because of I Matter and the tools that kind of like EOS, as we're both fond of, and our good friend Gino Wickman, who created it, he was brilliant, and he took the basics of business. We've took the basics of relationships and growth. And so what we created, we used. And so if it helps no one else, that'd be kind of sad. And yet it's helped me a ton. And so now literally I'm writing the next book.
Do you think you don't just have to be a visionary though to be scattered, right?
No.
You think that there's regular, I don't want to say this. I don't want to offend anybody because Dr. Doug hasn't been on my podcast, but he calls them single monkey brains versus then guys like me and you.
Right.
So we have 12 monkeys jumping in our head. Right. And we all know those people. So for the single monkey people, they still have trauma. They still have pain, right? And so it's still, this book is still relevant for them as well. People that are more just, the other 90% of the humans that don't have the ADHD, because that's basically what it is. So I think everyone's heard of ADHD. Not everyone's probably heard of Driven and that stuff, but 10% of the world has ADHD, blessing and a curse.
And that's increasing.
Yeah, and it's probably increasing as we multiply because it's probably,
and as we have more chatter.
Yeah, it's probably, yeah. So it is increasing. But I think the other 90% of the people still have some type of trauma that keeps them up at night, that affects their brain, right? That has created the fight or flight mechanism in their brain, right? And so I think with that, I think this whole book is still very relevant, even if you're not a visionary.
It wasn't written for visionaries. It was written for anyone who wants to get more out of life and more joy and peace and connection. And so the community we created, which is who I am and I wanted to be around, was purpose-driven visionaries who are ready for and committed to growth. And that's not just growth in the business, it's growth in life.
I want to talk about this term visionary because there's a lot of people that are listening, that might not even know what that term is. If I send them an email, it's going to say visionary founder of the Big Fish Contracting Company, and people are like, "It's a fixed visionary."
Right.
When did you first hear that term?
I was with my YEO group, Young Entrepreneur Group, that we started the Detroit chapter 27 years ago, and that's where Gino and I met. And we did a lot of business searching, and Vern Harnish and others, and even in EO, were talk about real successful people. And some were, Jack Welch is a amazing leader and manager and all these things. It's like, that's really cool. That's not really me. Okay. And then there's this, and then there's Walt Disney. You know, it's like, fuck, that is so cool. I mean, and literally he was on his deathbed in the hospital thinking about new things to do at Disney World. So it's that dreamer. It's that person who sees possibilities and opportunities and fills gaps and solves issues. And so that's where I first heard of it, was in YEO, which is now called EO, which I still think is a branding error.
Because all these guys, correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't realize that the problem was themselves. They always thought, oh, it's my business. I got to fix my business. And if I make my business better, then I'll be better.
Right.
Because I went through that stage for a second. I remember between like 2017 and 2020, I kept thinking, oh, the reason that my marriage isn't good, the reason I'm not a good dad.
As soon as my business works,
then I'll be better.
Right.
Yeah, so I think most business owners that have the driven gene and the ADHD, they probably all think it's like that, right? Because they get themselves into that mess, right?
And in my YEO group, 25 years ago, it was the first group I felt safe enough to go to them and say, I don't think I love my wife. This is my ex-wife. My business is fucked. I'm a mess. And I truly thought they were going to kick me out of the group. And they were like, we got you, brother. And that's when that broke the ice with my forum. And someone else like, dude, my business is struggling. And then, oh my God, I don't know if I'm married to the right person. It's like, oh, well, let's get real. So
everyone's walking around with shelves.
Right.
Oh, I'm happy.
Yes. Everything's great.
There's the picture.
Yes. Right. Oh, I look good.
There's the portrait.
Right. And when I was getting divorced, people were shocked because they're like, you seemed happy. Well, I pretended to be happy. So it was in EO that I first heard the term visionary, and I had someone to share it with. And then it was Gino, again, who became...
He mass-produced it. Like, he put it in his book. And like, when he sold 3 million copies, like, everyone's kind of, like, taking that term. But it's given new identity. Basically, all it did was an identity shift from, I'm a messed up individual, and, oh, I'm a visionary. It's like a positive spin on it's still the same person.
Yep.
Yeah,
I didn't think I belonged in business. I was always a great salesperson. And then I was promoted to sales manager. I was terrible at it and hated it. And then when my business, I sold, we went from 500,000 to 5 million in like 2 years. We were out of control. I mean, we were a mailing company. We had millions of pieces of mail that we worked through the night, and it was crazy. And so when how Gino was just starting EOS, and then I'm like, well, let's do it. So I was his third client. I sold his first client and half his first 20 clients because I saw what he was doing. He wasn't even called anything yet. So at a strategic coach meeting, there was a guy struggling. I'm like, you got to hire Gino. He said, what does he do? I'm like, I don't know. Right. But it was so simple. But what he did for me and others is he helped me to realize my place in business. So what he's intensely simple. And he would grab me and say, no, you're a visionary. You're a great visionary. You're a brilliant visionary. And that's where I first heard you're a flaming visionary, which my wife and I agree that's what I am. But not everyone I live with or work with loves being around a flaming visionary. But he's like, there's a place for you in business. You just need to make sure your vision is captured and you build a team around you. And then when I got my first integrator that really worked, we did take off. And literally, as I was going through this divorce, I took 2 months off and I told my leadership team, I'm like, I need to get away. And they were like, all right, that's cool. And they're like, we got you. I'm like, are you kidding? You're going to let me leave for a month or two? And they're like, you've been taking care of us for 8 years. It's time for us to take care of you. And I was like, and that's where I went and really did the work. And it was like, you know what? It is time for me to move on in my life. And I came back to work, was feeling pretty good. And they're like, we're glad you're back, but we don't want you doing the same old shit. So I let go of the vine. And again, I don't recommend getting divorced to let go of the vine. But I came back and I'm like, what do I do now? And they're like, what you're great at in love. I'm like, I didn't even know what that was. And that's when I Matter really started. So it was like, what am I great at? What do I love? Who am I? And then that's where it's like, are you kidding? I get to go out with prospects and clients and have a drink and golf and fly in their plane and ask them really good questions, solve some issues, and then they pay us. And then I have a team that could actually do the work. That's beautiful. Yeah. So Gino really helped me to see that I am a visionary, and that's the visionary in the business, but also, in EOS, we talk about letting go of the mind and the grip on the day-to-day and creating structure and people so we can delegate to people who are great at those things so we can elevate to things, doing and being things that we're great at and love. And yet I'm also a visionary in life. That's not an excuse. I can't say I'm not going to change the diaper because I'm a visionary and I don't like doing that. No, that doesn't work.
I tried that for a minute.
How'd it work?
Just told me I just need to
suck it up, buttercup.
Just stop telling yourself that.
Right.
Stop telling yourself you can't do that. Stop telling yourself.
And that's why I don't like to use the label as a visionary as an excuse.
Yeah, well, we get a bad rap now.
And it's not an excuse.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. And that's one thing that I was a little bit, I don't know what the word is. After I read the book Rocket Fuel, I think I took it a little bit to the extreme.
Right.
And just gave me permission.
Right.
Oh, like I really let go. I'm like, oh, no wonder.
Well, like they say, letting go is an abdication. It's not just.
Yeah. And so now that I'm learning, I will say that it allowed me to create the space to heal. And, going through that process over the last 3 or 4 years, with Brittany's help, parallel to me reading about Gino's work and then meeting you at the EOS conference and really, business is one thing, but that whole practice of human transformation from going from a human doing to a human being, I found it really cool that guys like you're the first person I ever heard talk about that. I was at your breakout, and I just love the title of it, the six habits of a great effing visionary. Right. And I'm like, wow, I need some better habits because I know I'm not that great of a visionary. I just keep saying I am, and I don't think I really am yet. So I went to that and I was like, oh wow. You can be peace, but it's Coach Bob. He's peace, love, and joy.
Right.
Well, people always told Benny that he's very joyful and very loving. Nobody ever called me peaceful, ever. And I'm like, I want that. I want that because Brittany had that peace. And then, a year later, then I hear Gino, Mr. Tough Guy, Emperor of the World, talk about it. And I was like, oh, if there's two guys that I know that are making it look cool, let me just. I was doing it with Brittany, and it felt cool, but I was afraid to tell anybody about it.
Right. Oh, sure. We were in the closet.
Because it was it was like a closet.
Gino and I came out of the closet.
Yeah, that is true. And then
and we did a lot of it together. I'm so blessed that he helped me so much in business. And I know I helped him a lot on the spirit side, but we've helped each other on it. So he's done things individually with his wife, and so have I. And the four of us have done some things together. And Gino and I do a lot together. And we push and pull and kick each other's ass and share resources, and we're brutally honest with each other, and we love each other. And it's a safe space to be a mirror, and it's to grow as a person, not just in the business.
Yeah, because it's like the business is going to end up growing anyway.
Right.
For
probably more if I get the fuck out of the way.
For
right.
the most part, yeah. Let's talk about some of those. I know, I just got done with a retreat here. This is my second retreat, the Visionary Summit. I keep hearing about this place, go to the mountain, and usually on your Zoom videos, you have this pillow in the back, or something that says, go to the mountain. What do you guys, let's just talk about the mountain first. What do you guys do up there?
Well, when you asked this isn't maybe easy for everyone, but what Cheryl and I did is when we first got together, this is 2000, so Y2K. Totally. And so
first version before COVID, man.
Right. All right. Oh, and now there's going to be another one, by the way, that it may be real or created by someone. That's a whole nother podcast. But it's basically Cheryl and I moved. She was like, okay, well, we were about to get married. She's like, let's move somewhere now. We could always move back. And I had a lot of business in Southern California and Colorado by design, because even if we were a Canadian distribution company, I had an amazing telemarketer. And she's like, so where are we calling? I said, Southern California and Colorado. And she's like, is that where there's a lot of big mailers? I'm like, I don't know. That's where I want to go. And so I spent a lot of time there. We looked in California. I was like, love it, but no. And then it was Boulder. Just had this vibe. And so Cheryl and I rented a place for nearly 2 years out there and when we got married. And we did a lot of spiritual work and healing and just being in nature and in the mountains. And I learned so much out there. And so then I would bring people out, including my friends Gino and Kurt. And so we would go into the mountains and work with different healers and different modalities.
You keep saying healer, and
there's many.
I don't know what the term healer means, but I feel like my audience is probably like, what does healer mean?
That's an interesting question. It's anyone who can help someone else to transform something negative to a positive. So a healer could be a doctor. But it's the healers we're talking about might be a shaman, it might be an astrologer, so suspend disbelief, to try different things. And so I've got even my mentor out there was a healer, very successful business person. He was more from the Eastern world of just being present and being, and so it was out there that we kind of discovered a place to be is a mantra Cheryl and I have is a place to be is wherever you are. It's not as soon as I get time, money, houses, whatever, we can be present right now. And so it was out there that we learned. And again, it was through Leaf Running Rabbit, who is a Native American who I've been working with for 20 years. And so he's one of the people that we sit with and we do hiking and we use the I Matter tools, ask ourselves deep questions. And literally with the beauty of the mountains, it's a different energy. It's a high. And so there's a lot of people doing medicine work and whatnot, which is awesome for certain things. And I think it makes sense for certain things. When we take people to the mountain, they get that high without any medications or correct.
Plants,
right.
like that,
And again,
like
there's a
that.
time and a place for that. And I honestly believe. And so what I love is people who've done a lot of those are like, wait a minute, I had that high too. And it's like, what is it? And it's like, it's called love. It's called connection. It's called God. It's spirit. It's beauty. It's presence. So we hike. We have great deep conversations. We work with a couple of these healers. Again, people who've studied and live with certain modalities who can help us to get out of our heads mainly. And so, so the mountain's 4-day retreat with 7 people.
And 7?
Yeah.
Never more, never less?
I like the fact that we're all hiking together and we can hear each other, or we can be in a couple different groups.
Do you guys camp or do you guys stay in a
No, we stay in a 5-star hotel.
Okay.
We're not goofy.
So you hike and then come
Day
back to the
trips,
hotel.
right? And then we do a hike up at a mountain, up in the mountains, up in the higher mountains. So it's about 11,000 feet, and we hike to the top or snowshoe to the top, and it is this ritual, this sacred ground where there were Chief Niwot used to be up there. I mean, hundreds of years ago, a spiritual healer. It's amazing vibe. It's a vortex of energy, and so to go there to heal. And what I've learned going to the mountain, going there is amazing. And yet even having my stone, which has the mountain on it, it's a mantra. It's a feeling. And so when I'm stressed, it's like, so if I was at 10,000 feet and looking at this tree and there's no noise, then I get clarity. I can do that when I'm sitting in my conference room if I go to that space.
Yes. I've actually experienced that before because I could be down in my little office. I have a bean bag.
Right.
I could close my eyes. I could meditate. I could take me to my happy place.
Right. The mountain's my happy place. Right.
There you go.
Yeah. And so that's where people go. And it's not, it's like from good to great, as Jim Collins would say. It's like, I have a really good life, but something's missing. So the theme of what we're kind of talking about here. And then people go to the mountain, they're like, oh, and it's not drastic changes necessarily. It's a simple shift, usually in our heads, that changes the trajectory for the rest of our lives. So it might be open with my wife, or be more present with my employees, or get in shape, or whatever it might be. And so what we help people to do is to tap into themselves and God and to trust and slow down and start to be more than do.
That could be a lot for some people listening. But if they don't want to go to the mountain, the summit is a good like, would you call it like a beginner of intermediate?
Yeah, so to me
to
it's,
come?
and it doesn't have to be I Matter or Unscattered Chatter. There's thousands of self-healing, personal, right, exactly. So to me, it is books and talks and podcasts and whatnot, and then find a peer group, whether it be the parent group that you're, in your community, or an entrepreneur group, a visionary group. That's where we have the Visionary Forum. So we have Zoom meetings, and that's a cool way to start to connect and to learn and grow and start to build a space. Right.
Yeah,
start to trust.
Yeah.
Then we have the summit, which we do. It's 3 days, 4 visionaries.
Because I just got done with this experience for the second time. I actually brought Brittany. I brought my media team. I brought a couple of my buddies from the roofing industry. Everybody loved it. I loved it. That's why I brought so many people. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like for you to lead these type of retreats. Help people kind of, start that transformation process or continue through that transformation process and connect, because it was a very emotional, we did learn some business stuff.
Yep.
some great business stuff. I mean, there were some great speakers here on business, but I think what everyone's going to walk away with is that feeling of like the connection when people were starting to share some of their stories. Talk to me about what that's like for you as the leader of this retreat and the host, but then also what do you think it's like for the person that shows up at the summit?
Community is so important in the evolution of individuals and in the human race. I mean, it's truly connecting with each other, which helps us to connect with something greater, whatever that is for people. And as the facilitator, if someone has chosen to, be with us for 3 days, basically, and they spend a fair amount of money, it's just an honor that they're here. And so to have the process and the flow and the right speakers, and my wife comes to that because she and I together with our masculine and feminine, we create a safe space. And we take care of people. We think of things. It's at a beautiful location. And so to facilitate that and to help people to lower their guard for a second, which a lot of people are nervous about, rightfully so, I get it. And then it's okay that I shared that I had an issue in the past or I'm feeling a certain way. And then people are like, yeah, me too. So what? There's nothing wrong with you. And then it's like, oh my gosh, they still love me. They didn't run. And so to facilitate that and to have someone break down in tears, and it's funny because whether I'm doing a business meeting, if I'm doing business coaching or one-on-one coaching or at the summit, I love having boxes of tissues out and people are like, what's that for? I'm like, oh, half of people are going to cry. And they're like, what? It's usually tears of joy, just of release. And so again, and we don't focus on the adversity, but to facilitate people's evolution and to either throw something, that old narrative in our head or that old emotion in the fire and watch it burn and go away with others that have their hands on our backs and we give each other hugs, that feeling of connection and love. Like I told you, when I first met my wife, I was like, what is this feeling? And when people leave the summit, the people are like, I don't know what this is. What was it? It's love. It's connection. And it's not all the woo-woo stuff and just the spiritual, like you said. It's spiritual and business.
I've been to silent retreats, and it's not that at all. It's not like that. It's not that at all. Like, that we didn't do any yoga, we didn't do any meditation,
We talked.
We talked. We sat around campfires. Yeah. Sat around circles in the fields and like on the grassy area in chairs. We did some workshop, did some business stuff. That's the best.
But at the end of the day, what did we change? Or what did we shift?
We shifted our inside heart, like our heart, to realize, first of all, everyone of our peers is going through something.
Right.
We're all really grateful for where we're at. We need to experience the pain for what it is.
Learn from it.
Don't run from it.
Right.
I'm a big fan of like going a little bit deeper with the pain because I think that's where the true healing actually starts. But then having people to like talk to help you kind of go through that and hold your hand, right? And walk through that proverbial fire together, right? Yep. Or go into that dark room. If it's not a fire, maybe it's just a dark room, right? I don't know what's worse. Depends on who you are.
Right.
But like, just open that door in the dark room, go through it, and guess what? When you hold someone's hand, you go through it. Two people are going to be.
We're going to be okay.
We're going to find a light switch.
Right.
Then we turn the light on, and then guess what? It's all roses and rainbows, just for a couple more days though, because then you never know, something else can happen.
Well, any anger, fear, or frustration is a learning opportunity, and if I avoid it, it's going to come back bigger and bigger. And so, as I've learned to flip those, we have a flip it tool in the book as well. Learn to flip it into a lesson. And learn from the past and imagine a great future so I can impact this moment. Then the kind of the bad news is there's going to be another issue, but it's usually higher level and now I have got the tools and the community to flip those emotions and let them go, to acknowledge and accept those emotions. So to run the summit, it's very fulfilling. It makes my heart sing. And to have people give me a hug at the end and say, this made a huge difference in my life. It's like, wow, I'm living my purpose. And for others, again, people belong to something. They feel safe that they can share. They're transforming and elevating. They have access to more wisdom, either from the people in the room or the resources that we have. It's an amazing community, and that's where this world is going, hopefully, but it is going. That is healing the world, where people belong. A lot of people are lonely. I know I was and still am at times. And so to have that safe space and community with my wife and with my visionary friends and with my baseball friends and whatnot, but it's to have that community to be myself. And I used to be different to you and different to you and different to you. And it's like, oh, shit, who am I? I mean, right.
Yeah, that's very
And boy, is it a lot more relaxing just to go, this is who I am.
Well, I know for me, with all the recent shifts and things that I've been going through in my business life, this was like a perfect timing, right? Like, it was 2 weeks before, like, basically my whole business life felt like it blew up, right?
Right.
A lot of fear around that. I knew through my training, that I could sit still, be present with everything. And then I saw this on the calendar and I'm like, oh man, what perfect timing to go hang out with a completely different group of people, different industries, different trades, different walks of life, different ages. I mean, we had a 25-year-old and we had a 70-year-old.
Right.
Right.
And all with wisdom.
All in between.
Right.
They all had great wisdom. They all gave hugs. They all held space. They all listened without judgment. And, that was very powerful for me, especially, to be able to have a place like that. I think everyone, especially business owners and entrepreneurs, because it is lonely, right? And we do crave connection. When is the next summit?
Next summit is March 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, and so if anyone's interested in coming to the summit, get a hold of me, message me, DM me. I'll connect you with Coach Bob. And we'd love to have you there. We only have probably, I don't know, maybe 15 seats left because I feel like...
Right. Well, we cap it at 35, and we're at like 20. Right. And we're just leaving here. Right.
Yeah.
And we picked the next date for fall here. It's like 7th, 8th, and 9th. I'm not sure. Whatever that first Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after Labor Day. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's interesting. Because, so there's 2 summits on the agenda. One thing I want to ask you before we wrap this podcast up, and thanks for sharing that. Those are retreat experiences. I think those are cool.
I'm honored to be a part of it.
And for you that don't want to go that deep, the forum is a great place. It's very, it's two times a month. We get on a Zoom call for 90 minutes, and we usually have a speaker 1 month or 1 week, and then the other week is more of like experience shares, and we try to solve an issue that we're having in our business
Or life.
or life. Yeah, mostly life, hopefully. Because if we can help our life, then our business becomes easier, right? So
if I can say one more thing about the summit.
yeah.
A lot of times people join Forum or come to Summit to be a better leader, to grow their business, to be a better visionary. And what people are realizing that it's like, well, we didn't talk that much about business, even though we do some, but it's like, oh, as I know more who I am and I show up as me and I'm more present, that helps me to be a even greater leader and to be even a greater father and a husband or wife or mom or whatever it might be. So in an indirect way, it is elevating your business, but it starts with us. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, you did a exercise, the eulogy exercise. You mentioned that. We did that at this summit. But when you think about your legacy, what do you hope to leave behind?
Lived every day to its fullest, passionately in love with my wife, and show it, and she knows it, which maybe wasn't always the best. If she knew it, but maybe I wasn't always present. So I'm still learning that because she's so amazing. To be a great father and to be a leader of, we're in what I call the wisdom age. We've gone through agricultural age, industrial age, technology. And when we hit the ceiling of complexity as a society, it's scary, it's fearful, people are nervous, and we're there right now. People are like, it's a terrible world. I think it's the greatest time to ever be alive. And it's about tapping into your wisdom and my wisdom and everyone else's, and we elevate our energy together. And so to be known as a part of that, it's a revolution. I mean, I love what the founding fathers did is they left the tyranny of the churches and the kingdoms for freedom, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's, to me, our opportunity and even obligation, I feel, for us visionaries to be an example of, wow, look at what Dad did. He tried this business, and against all odds, he pulled it off, and he failed at this, and yet look at what he learned from. So to be a great visionary, leading this revolution where our kids and our grandkids thank me and thank our generation of visionaries, say, you left the world better than you found it. So to be known as that, and then simply that I am I am. And that's, I am present. So Bob was present. I was impactful in the moment. I was a safe space. I was an observer. I'm a great coach because I'm a great observer of you and what you're doing, but to be an observer of my own life. And so develop I Matter for not only visionaries, but for millions of kids, because what are visionaries? We're big kids. And so to go to the kids, they're easier because they don't have all the shit and all the baggage that we have. And so to work with kids and to implement a mentoring system to change the world.
Your kids, you talk about them a lot.
I do.
You know, mentioned
my two heroes.
You mentioned your son and his Princeton baseball. That's awesome. But I really love the story of your daughter the most. No offense, Nick, but I want to talk about Grace a little bit. Grace, first of all, it's a beautiful name. My daughter's middle name is Grace. And you told a story at the last summit that I was at in Columbus about her, about the COVID thing. And she's a special person because she's mirroring back to you. I feel like more of the spiritual connection with God. She's trying to show you a way to get to the explain what's going on with her. Give me the Grace story a little bit, and talk to me about where you're at with your spiritual journey and your connection to God.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's something that you're still kind of
it's a journey
grappling with.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Cheryl and I are students of spirit and God and connection, and it's a great journey. I'm glad I get to go through it with her. Grace was all about peace and love and connection as a kid, and has an engineer mind. And so when she discovered robotics, so she wanted to be a teacher and then discovered robotics. She's like, I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. And she's brilliant at it. Had an amazing, got into engineering school at U of M, got an internship as a freshman to go be a mechanical engineer, get paid really well. Then they wanted her back for a high-paying job her second year, which is unheard of. And then she went through, we got locked down hard here in Michigan, and it was almost like she was in a prison in her dorm. She made the Michigan marching band, and it was canceled, and then there was all this fear around it, and I think she lost faith, and I don't know, she didn't have a known labeled connection with God, and she literally declared years ago, I don't know if I believe in God. And we're like, cool, that's it. Let's talk about it, because she had that engineer mind. So through these low vibrations of loneliness, and fear, she went to a church in Ann Arbor that was very non-judgmental, and she had an experience. She had a connection, and for her, it was through Jesus, the Bible, and with God. And all of a sudden, it was like had hope again. And it was, we were nervous. I mean, our beautiful daughter, who's all about love and connection, was lost a lot of faith in life. So for her to do that was, and then when she chose to not go be an engineer and make a lot of money, which is one of the things I would love for my kids, is, okay, you made some money, you can take care of yourself. I want to be an elementary teacher. So after 3.5 years, switches to elementary ed, and the Unscatter the Chatter is sitting on a table, and as she's telling us this on speakerphone, Cheryl's like, what is she doing? And I'm like, well, just suffer through the next couple of years of school, then suffer through 10 years, you make money, then you can go. This is what I was thinking. As I'm looking at my book, this is what I teach. Live your legacy now. Yeah. So I'm so glad that we wrote that book for us, but that book was sitting there, and it's like, man, this is your life. As long as you know, okay, you may or may not make the money you want. And she's like, I know that. And she's very simple life. And she's like, this is what I want to do. And she's so happy. And so we love going. It's a great church. It's about an hour away, but we go there fairly often. So I teach, as you said, a combination of kind of business and spirit. And I've been avoiding the word God for years. And I've got dogma around the evangelists, and you must go through me to get to God. And so maybe in a previous life, I abused connection to God, or who knows, whatever it might have been. And so it's fun as I'm teaching more of what some people call New Age, which is kind of funny because it's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, the New Age spirituality connection, where it isn't necessarily through a religion or a church. And I'm very open to all the other things, but Cheryl and I have kind of found our own way, and we're still evolving every day. So my daughter, when I'll say, it was, synchronicity, and her thing is, it's God, Dad. And even some of my friends will use that. And so when she went on a mission trip instead of a high-paying internship, I'm like, why are you going? She said, I'm going to learn how to create spiritual conversations. And I'm like, that's kind of what I do for a living. And yet I'm still kind of afraid of it. And I will only go there if I think you're ready. She just goes, and she doesn't preach or evangelize. She just asks great questions. Like on campus at U of M, they've got this big black box. They take markers. And the question is, where did you find joy this week? And it's like, oh, and I'm like, that's cool. Because she's talking about joy and connection. And then people either, and if they walk away, they're fine. Or it's like, wow, who are you kids? And what do you do? And so she got married, as you mentioned, a month ago, and there were 50 of her and my son-in-law. That's the 5th time I've said that. I'm honored he's part of our family, but it's still new for me. They are the most simple couple, enjoying, being in nature, simple games. They don't drink, which again, there's nothing wrong with that, whatever. But so 50 of their friends were at the wedding. And we had a dry wedding, which was different. It's their wedding. And again, the old me would have been never. And
Your flask.
Right, exactly. I didn't have a flask at this one. I've been to weddings where we tailgated before. And I had 5 people, Benny, come up to me that night or the next morning and said, the energy and vibe at this wedding and these kids, they're like, there's hope for the future. For these kids of the night, it was a community event, setting up for it, taking down. We had it at a barn. And it was so beautiful, and God was so in the church and so in the barn. And a friend of mine whose daughter got married a few weeks before even commented that they never saw a bride in such joy on the altar. And that, I mean, God was in that room like there, and I know God's in every room. So to answer your question, she's been nudging us and even learning with us on that it's okay to call this higher energy and the creator and the spirit, to call he or she or it God.
Why do you keep saying he or she or it?
Because
you're still struggling with it, right?
Oh yeah, oh, absolutely. Oh, I'm not the master of that. I am a student.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I love where Grace is at. I love her path. I love that she keeps telling you about Jesus, because I do believe that's the way. It's the shortcut. It is it leaves out all of the other anxieties of like what to do, right? Because it's a clear path, and it's, to me, it's like through Jesus is the path, is the way, right? And so yeah, I'm proud of her. I can't wait to meet her one day. Like,
you'd love her, and, and she
her.
would love you. Yeah,
I already know I would love her, and I just drive to that church, drive the hour to spend time with your daughter, regardless. Just think of it like that, and then go to lunch with her after church.
Right, which we do. Right. No, absolutely.
Man, that's awesome. What kind of questions? What does she say to you? Like when she does try to nudge you, and she tries to talk to you about the Jesus that she knows. What kind of questions is she asking you?
It's nothing even that deep, but it's being present, and so that's a great question. I can't think of any specific, but it's mainly just who she is and her energy, and even her wedding. They got engaged in February and wanted to get married in August, and both Joel's parents and we were like, "Why so fast?" And they're like, "Because we want to live together and we want to be with God together, and why wait?" And so again, we pushed and pulled, and they asked for questions and feedback. And then even one of the parents said, "But it's really stressful. Why not wait till you graduate?" And both Grace and Joel not only are very spiritual, but they're also engineers, minds. And they're like, "But if it's stressful, why wait 18 months? And it's like, good point. And then Cheryl, in her wisdom, is like, "Why does it have to be stressful?" And it still was a little bit, but we just like brought God into the equation, and the pastor and her friends, and it's just how she is being. And that's what I love about her. She's not an evangelist. She just is an example where she's a glowing light. And now her goal, and when she read Unscatter the Chatter, she said, "Wow, it's amazing how much alike we are." And I'm like, we're not alike at all. We have very similar values, but she's got an engineer mind, a rule follower. I don't have an engineer mind, and I'm not a rule follower. And she said, "But I'm here to help kids know that God loves them. And you're here to help people know they can love themselves." And it really is the same thing. And so, and I don't know if I shared this when I was reading to my 8-year-old Grace and 4-year-old Nick many years ago. And we were talking about God, and my 5-year-old, 4.5-year-old Nick, he's like, Daddy, I think I figured it out. I'm like, what's that, Nick? He said, love is magic and magic is God. I'm like, that sums it up for me. And so whether we call God, or love or magic, to me, it's all the same thing. Again, we could have a debate about that. And again, it's not a debate. It is what it is. But then my 4.5-year-old said, but I have a question. I said, what's that? And he said, can God hear us fart? And so he's this wise soul, which he is, and this playful soul, which he is. So it is a journey, and I love it, and I'm glad I'm going through it with my wife and with other visionaries. And I think that's part of the allure to the Visionary Forum is we are talking about spirit, and we're talking about infinite intelligence. Some call it God. Some are Catholic. Some are Christians. Some are Jewish. Some are, and what we're coming to is in safe space, that it's like, it's the art of learning together, as Dr. Bill Isaac says, that if I trust you, and again, you're telling me what your experience is, and I'd like to learn. I may or may not change today or do something today, but I'm smarter for hearing you and expressing how I think. And so when I get it out of my head, that chatter, and I say something, I'm like, that doesn't really resonate.
Well, and I try to do a really good job because, I grew up Baptist, and a lot of my faith came from that, growing up like that. What I wanted to get rid of is the judgment part, right? Because, there was also like, if this was 20 years ago and you said those things about the universe.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right.
I'd be like, well, you're not going,
You've been burned at the stake.
I'd start attacking you.
Right.
And like, I still see myself having urges of like, because I want it for you so bad, because the feeling that I have in my heart is just like, I can't explain it to people. I think a lot of people see it through my life and through my transformation. And being able to do certain things. And I will tell you that's only through God. And again, the only way I get to God is through Jesus, right? And people can say that there's other ways and stuff like that. I find it like when you know, like, and I don't know how else to say that, right?
Sure.
But I really appreciate you spending time with me. I love this lake. This is a beautiful place. This is a sanctuary. I'm glad that you're going to be having the summit here every fall because it's awesome. I can't imagine not wanting to come back to this beautiful spot. So thank you for that. One last question, just to kind of recap. What advice would you give to someone who is at the height of their business success, but feels empty or disconnected from themselves?
It's to commit to themselves. And that is time and money to soul search and to spend time on. A lot of time people say, well, as soon as I have time and money, I'm going to go do these other things. Well, why not now? The time is now and the answers are inside. And when I mean inside, when I slow down, it is coming from God and or from my heart and soul. So I think it's commit and pick a system and a peer group. There's 1,000, as we say in the business side, there's probably hundreds of operating systems. Pick one. So it's pick a peer group and an operating system, whether it be a book or a workshop, and it's just do the work because it is a journey, and to go through it alone, I have a hard time with it. So I'm blessed and honored and grateful that my wife and I are both going through it. So it's share it with your spouse too, and it is interesting that isn't always the case, So it's commit, and that's time and energy. And to me, it starts with that. So I start most mornings with just tapping in. And so to be quiet and again, to share it, because there is that chatter. And so in community, you can say here's what I've learned and what I believe, and here's what I've learned, and I still love you. So it's, those would be the two things: commit to yourself and commit to a community.
Is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I guess a comment, though, even just how we came together. Again, I would call that
serendipitous.
Right, exactly. Right. And Grace would say, it's God, Dad.
Well, no, it's God, because he orchestrates simply. He's the puppet master, if you will.
Yeah.
Making that tree grow, making that flag put up there, making the video cameras, making everything, because everybody's God creates the scenery, the art, and then he creates these humans that create the cameras, the laptops, this table, right? You know, your shirt.
Right.
It's funny. It's fun as it is. But yeah, I mean, it's an intersection, right? Like, who would have ever thought that Benny Fisher, in the miserable life that he was in the middle of, even though like most people would say it's miserable, I felt like I was miserable, but he put Brittany in my life.
Yep.
He put the business problems in my life. So then that way I would find the book Rocket Fuel. I then came to an EOS conference. Gino Lickman was just this guy in the sky. Like, I didn't even know who he was. Right. You know, he pops in for one keynote and he leaves. Right. You know, like, and then I come into your breakout, you know, and I'm like, oh, there's Bob. Like, you know, he's friends with Gino. Oh, he's like doing this. He's like a great visionary. He's like doing all this fun stuff, and he's spiritual. I'm like, oh, wow, I can get behind that. And like, I remember a year goes by, and I was like, I don't have time for the forum. I don't have time for that, you know, because I was still being busy, right? I remember paying, though, because I wanted to join, because I wanted to support your movement, because I believe what you do is really important. I believe that community and connection is going to be the great asset of life. Like, I believe money will be abundant. I believe things will be abundant. Nobody's going to care about any of the stuff. But what people are going to crave, and what entrepreneurs especially are going to crave, is community and connection. Not only for them to be part of a community, but for them to be able to create their own community and connection, right? To kind of shepherd their flock. It's no different than what Jesus did. It's no different than the people of the Bible did. It's no different than even some of the bad people in the world. Right. They have a flock of people that they want to shepherd, right? Because it's important to create that community. Now, what we can do is try to create amazing communities and communities that are doing good in the world, right? And so that way, yeah, I believe that I believe over the next 10 years, especially with AI, and especially as things get easier business-wise, like, and we're not going to have to like work so much and have to do so much.
Right. We have a lot more freedom.
We're going to have a lot more freedom. We're going to have to be a lot more of a human being, because if we have to sit still with our thoughts and our trauma rushes up, like, we got to know what to do with it, right? And I know you love the book Letting Go and Untethered Soul and Driven, just like I do. And it's, you know, those books are awesome tactical books, but, you know, the book, you know, the New Testament, the Old Testament, like, if you combine all of that together, you can really get a good glimpse of like what's to come, because, like, you know, these amazing people have wrote amazing books, and they can kind of give you the secret sauce, if you just have to go out and create the community and connection, right? Because I think we're all connected, we're all linked together.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I met John LaDuca yesterday, and me and him have a daughter that's got the same exact name, Evelyn Grace,
right?
And you have a daughter named Grace,
right? It's
like just wild to me. Like, it's, you know, it's no coincidence,
right?
This has been another edition of the Big Fish Cares podcast. If you got value out of this podcast, like, subscribe, comment below, do all the things. And if you want to join me at the next summit in March, hit me up. Or if you want to come next year to the September one, let me know. I'd love to hang out with you. I'd love to see you. And we'll see you guys again on another episode.
Thank you, Benny.